Okay, so good night. So I fixed what needed to be fixed, so I'm satisfied with the results. Just for the sake of the video, I kind of covered the red ones. Again, I am excluded or included not because of the color of my background or of my clothes, but it depends whether I speak or not by my speech. And Israel is knew that for some time. That's why, as I mentioned in the previous video, for several years I understand that they in all sorts of occasions they want me to be quiet mostly, but sometimes they want me to speak specifically. So I understood it's something to do with activation of these kind of constructions, symbolic constructions. I guess that most of the knowledge regarding the symbolic language, and of course the Israelis have some knowledge, was maintained by the Titans, because they are the ones that that survived the purge during the 1980s. Not all of them. Some actually resettled and find themselves in all sorts of places, but mostly it was them, because naturally they are more robust by the way that by the material that they're made of. Although arguably you could say that they were much less, of course. Arguably, I don't know. They had less guilt because they were taken from their homeland and lived for several decades like the life of in kind of at least you can say that it was a life of secret, which is not which is not a favorable place to be. And as I said, they described that lands in the beginning it was actually horrible slavery, but things changed. For the women, for the men, it was only got worse. That's why you don't see men. You don't see men like in Israel for a long time. When I was born, it was already the situation. Like I was born in 1984, 40 years ago, January 7, 1984. It was already the situation that you couldn't find males in Israel. Now it wasn't that you couldn't find yes, several males actually arrived during the times, and I've described it. I don't want to get into it right now, but it wasn't like no males at all arrived, but they died very quickly, and it wasn't like there wasn't like a population of males, a steady population of males like it was like the situation in the previous decades. But the situation for the females gradually improved, and of course during the 80s it substantially changed because of the dramatic events, and after some time they became prominent within the intelligence organization of Israel, and presumably other places as well, but regarding other places it's less of my kind of a concern. So I still get messages of, that are kind of like metaphors of the words of the devil, as I mentioned, before. Which means, you want to see arms and legs. Wow, you want us to fight, like in Black Hawk Down. It's not like that. We use other ways. We use, operatives. We use our own Titans. We use, secret spies. We use missiles, and you don't know about it because it's not disclosed to the public. Again, it's the constant issue is that I do not know what's good for me, and only you know. Presumably, even though no matter what miracle you will see, you will still maintain that the knowledge is strictly in your hands. So I'll tell you something that I haven't told you in the past, like something new. I haven't spoken about it because it belongs to there is kind of a type of topics or things that I do not speak about, and I told you that I do not speak about, which is ancient past. All sorts of knowledge that I have. Mostly what I speak about is about, again, the whereabouts of my predecessor, a guy that probably was born around 1940 in Israel, something like that, and he lived the life of Israel as Israeli, and his action culminated during the 1980s. And he's the protagonist of many of my stories, again, I'm not him, I'm not his son or something like that. No, I'm not a time traveler. I have my own life, and he had his own life. But he was a messenger, and he had this special relation with the Neros, the robots. And this, the thing that he done was very, very, very important for my own life, to understand what's going on in this world, because this is the previous chapter. But before him, there were many other previous chapters. specifically in Israel, like in the Zionist state of Israel, starting the end of the 19th century or the beginning of the 20th century, just in the passing of the centuries. But before that, there were other. If you go back like even further, there were other episodes, and I almost never speak about it because it's kind of it has. First of all, I know little about it, much less than I know about the things that happened during the 1980s. Because of course, naturally, the things that happened during the 1980s are almost replicated in my own life. Like it's the same places, the same shitty people, the same it's even sometimes the same building, like the same just the same. So, but the ancient past or distant past, it's less of of your concern, and it's not something that is terribly, I would say, important, even though it's interesting. And in general, it should be said that there wasn't a constant connection between the two planets. I've said it many times. It's not that the two planets, developed, hand by hand. No. It could have been like that in kind of like an alternative history, but it's not the way that it went. Like, it's just, reality, this is history. It wasn't like that. The gates were always there, but, mostly they were not used until the 20th century. But sometimes they have been used. And the earliest people that I know for certain that used them were, as I said many times, the Egyptians of the Old Kingdoms, which means around 5,000 years ago, even before the great pyramids of Giza were constructed. But even then, they had some kind of a connection, and I've spoken about it in the past. It's actually very interesting. Like, it's very everything that belongs to ancient Egypt is very interesting because it's so peculiar and out of this world. Like, not only the Venusian aspect, but their own life was just to understand what the way that they live is something like it's like mind-boggling. It's kind of like it's completely different. I can have divination regarding the life of the Romans or the Greeks, and of course the Jews of the Second Temple period that lived. The friends of Jesus, like famously. These people. These people that are unbelievably similar to the ones that actually live in Israel right now. I can understand, but I can relate to episode from the history of Christianity and even from the history of Islam. But it's incredibly difficult for me to kind of relate to things that happen in ancient Egypt, because I have nothing to cling to. Like, I have nothing to hold. Because they have it was such a different, people, they have, and you can't understand them, by looking at the pyramids. Even though I would have liked to visit Egypt and watch the pyramids. It's something that I wanted since I was a child, and I never had the opportunity. But and with all the respect that I have towards Egyptology as a science, and it's important science, of course, I believe that, you cannot really understand these people by just research into material evidence, or in other words archaeology by definition, or research into text, or in other way history by definition. Like the tools of history and archaeology are not enough in order to understand these people. So yes, it's very important to dig things from the ground and categorize them, and it's very important to learn the text and people that are doing it for hundreds of years. And actually even during the Roman time, the time of I think Adrianus, it was already they already 2,000 years ago they already had Egyptian craze, that they were enamored by ancient Egyptians, and something. They didn't have archaeology, of course, but they decided things kind of diggings and all sorts of stuff, according to their own very limited knowledge. But you can't really understand these people. They had such a different life, and it's nothing like the Greeks or the Romans or Jews or Christians or Muslims. They're just so different. They were tremendously different. But still, they were humans, and they had they had a religion that was incredibly important for them. Sometimes people today can actually watch these kind of sculptures of these gods with the heads of animals. Not all of some were actually had human, according to the depiction, were human heads, and some several had Ra and Bast, and actually almost all the famous ones had kind of the head of animals. And And you could say, I mean, what is this thing? Is this kind of like, I mean, fantasy or science fiction? But no, it was religion. They took it extremely seriously. Like everything that relates to religion was incredibly important for them, and like I mean, it was an integral part of their life. Like I mean, like, the gods, and and I mean, it's just so different, so different. But I mean, let's go back, get back to our time. I mean, I don't. You might not understand like the severity of the situation, because you need to understand that your knowledge about reality is skewed by the history books that you were taught, like both as children and as adults. Like you think that what you know is what's in the books, but it's not always the case at all. History, I mean, was written always like by the winners, and I mean according to like an agenda, and it was always like skewed. And you, like the people of intelligence services of this world, you did not invent like the rewrite of history, and and the spinology and all the things that you think that you're so good, like I mean expert, like that that you can manufacture truth and change the psychology of people, like to think along those lines, and you change the narrative, like all this kind of like I mean like new terminology to describe like I mean all sort of like disgusting human behaviors that you think that are new, but they are nothing but new. Like people have done it since I mean the beginning of writing. Like I mean they've done this thing, like manipulations and lying and rewriting of history, and like I mean like changing like the setting the agenda I mean of the people, or I mean setting the status quo, or changing the narrative, all this kind of like supposedly modern or postmodern kind of like I mean ideas. They were always present. Like humans always have done that. It was all I mean since they began they invented writings. I mean at first writing was used mostly for inventory, like I mean like text taken or like I mean the first texts are something like 2 pounds of rice, 3 pounds of the wheat, 4 things like that. It's kind of these are the first texts, and I mean they're not terribly interesting, even though because they are very old, they are somewhat interesting. But I mean after that, like after the initial like phase of like writing, I mean how much kilograms of or other ancient like measurement unit of measurement of stuff you have. After this first stage, immediately they started manipulations and the writing of history and spinning and all of these things that you think that are so new, and you're such an expert on the matter. It was always being done, always, since people invented writing. And by definition, this is since the beginning of history, because this is how you define history. So, like imagine yourself with all your lies, and look at the world. I mean, look at how I mean, examine the situation, the current situation. It's so ridiculous. I mean, again, I do not believe that all of you, did not know about Venus. I think it's a kind of, you were just lying. I mean, of course, many people knew about the Venusians, like in the Venus, certainly in Israel, but also abroad, of course, in the United States. But yes, I do believe that, what's going on right now is not entirely fake. Yes, some people various people some quantity of people, I don't know if it's 50% or 70%, but quite a bit of people I would guess even 70 or 80%, something like that, of the intelligence people of this world did not know about Venus. Which is insane, because it's such a new, conspiracy. It's relatively, it's only started doing in the 1960s, and it's not like, so you actually, you invented stuff and then you believe in it. How stupid can you be? And of course, this is mostly, most ridiculous. It's mostly ridiculous with regards to the Russians and the Americans, because I know for a fact that some of them actually, yes, they didn't know about like what's going on, and yes, now their amusement is authentic. At least several of them, like some of them. I don't know if it's 50% or something like that, but yes, not all of like many people in the intelligence services, both Russia and the United States, even like higher ups, even today, are surprised by the new knowledge about Venus, which is insane, because you created this shit, like you created the lie, and you believe it, like it was kind of given to you by God Himself, Mount Sinai, like you invented this shit, and not in a very and not in the most gentle way. As I said, it was obviously manufactured very quickly because of things that happened during 1964, like in the Ranger 4 and the Valera 4, and even though it was a tremendously successful conspiracy because it was supported by most of the superpowers of the world. So I mean, it's kind of like, even if it was supported just by one of the Russians or the Americans of the time, it probably would have been very successful. But with both of them together, so yes, it became extremely successful. But you actually can see the kind of, the raw hand, the quick hand of the manufacturing process, like in the history books, like in public history books, and you have to believe in it. Like how ridiculous can humans be? So think given this, this bizarre situation, can you really trust history? Or historian from 5,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago? When you could say they weren't historians, but they were some kind of historians. But certainly, future writers, whatever you really think of them as historians or not, it doesn't matter. Like, whether it's like Thucydides or Herodotus or people just even Batuta or Marco Polo, doesn't matter. How can you trust, like, think, you fell to your, you've written your own shit, like, from now, so, can you even, begin to kind of separate truth from fiction? And that's what historians are doing, and so you can do it to some extent, but, to a very limited extent. So you need to understand, you have very limited knowledge of history, but also very limited knowledge of the universe, which is, it's like, this is part of life. Science, it progresses, gradually. You are far from discovering all the kind of, nothing of it. It's so funny that many people today kind of and it wasn't like that like a generation or 2 generations ago, but of course they believe in other stupid thing. I don't say that that there is kind of like constant decline in generations. All the time, all the older people think that the younger generation is kind of like, decadent and things like that, and it's not true. Because they had their own shit, like they already forgot many times. Like many times, the older generations like are very good at identifying the new shit that the new generations are generating, but they forgot like their own shit, like from before. So every generation they have their own like shitty ideas and ridiculous like many times like in this channel I kind of like I very vehemently like speak against like the specifically the modern notion of like gender fluidity, both of humans and Venusians, which is something that is very prevalent like in my generation, like for people that were born during the 80s and the 80s, like they were born into this like a world that is starting to become like a new reality, that people think along those lines that they never thought like that before. Even though, of course, they were always homosexuals. But these kind of like ideas of gender fluidity is something very new. So I speak against it, especially in the Venusian context, because I think that it was, it had horrible consequences, in the Venusian context. But I do not say that, because, the LGBTQ phenomenon that is so widespread today, presumably it means that, this generation is much worse than the generation of the 1950s in Israel or the United States or whatever. No, I even, many times, I explicitly say the opposite, that the opposite is true. Because these people, maybe, they didn't have, like, the gender fluidity fuck-ups in their, like, ideas, and maybe LGBTQ was not as common, and certainly out of the closet. It wasn't, like, as, life out of the closet was certainly not as common as today, but they had other ridiculous ideas and incredibly stupid, like, notions and all sorts of, twists of thought that, some of it actually is mostly forgotten by people of today, because people forget, what happened, like, even a year ago. So certainly they don't really know what happened during the 1950s. So every generation, they have their own, like, incredibly stupid ideas, and sometimes the next generation, they have their new ones, and then they abandon the old shitty ideas, and they invent new shitty ideas. That's the way it is. So you don't really, you have very limited knowledge of history, and also very limited. So what I mean to say, that's something that became kind of, quite, common today, but it wasn't like that up until like a generation ago. It's kind of the belief that, from now on, mostly technology will be, centered around new versions of iPhones that, must be released every year, and that, that they will mostly be, and that mostly they will be identical. But if you are to believe like Apple, maybe the camera is somewhat, improved, like from model to model, but there is almost no way to scientifically check this kind of claim. So we mostly need to believe Apple, because it's like the differences are in like in a subatomic level. So I mean, you cannot really test this. I mean, but nevertheless, even though it's, I mean, the claimed differences between the cameras of each model is something that belongs to the subatomic level. I mean, nevertheless, you still, I mean, for some presumably religious reasons, you still need the new model. So I mean, you still need to buy like at least like, if not every year, so every other year, like I mean, to buy a new one. And I mean, and this is, I mean, what's, I mean, mostly, I mean, what's like, I mean, under the category of technology, like today, like I mean, that's, and presumably it should be like that since forever. I mean, until forever. I mean, that's I mean, the technology, that's the tech tree that is left to be discovered by humans. Like I mean, new iPhones every year with, I mean, like a subatomic difference, like in the quality of the cameras. I mean, supposedly. It's quite new. I mean, I mean, when I was born, it was still, I mean, you know, yeah. I mean, I mentioned the '60s. Like I mean, there was so much, like, you know, optimism regarding space. But even during the '80s, like in the early '90s, when I was born, it was still, I mean, you know, people were still, you know, enchanted by the, you know, technology and, you know, internet, and started to be, you know, I mean, became like public with the World Wide Web. And I mean, and today it's kind of, I mean, not every people, but many people are just, I mean, they just think that, I mean, that's, I mean, yeah, that's it. I mean, from now on, only I mean, negligible improvement in the camera of the iPhone, and that's it. Like I mean, nothing else. So no, I mean, in reality, there is still much to be discovered that is not related to, I mean, to the quality of the, like, your iPhone or any other like Android device. Like I mean, I use iPhone. Sorry, I mean, they don't pay me like I don't get money from no endorsers or something like that. That's what I use, but I'm used to it. But no, I mean, there is, I mean, still much to be learned about the universe. So you have such limited information. You need to understand, and this is true history as well. I mean, much of what you think about, it's true about history, is not accurate, and this is especially true for, I mean, things that did not leave like text or material evidence. And because I mean, there are many kind of like in history is about also archaeology, but I mean certainly history is very biased. There are many bias in the way that people are writing history. Like historiography is a biased profession, but there is one bias which is kind of like, I mean, almost inherent, and it's almost impossible to overcome this bias. And this is the bias of the existing over the non-existing. Which means that you will mostly like create a model of reality or a puzzle of reality using pieces that you have. But I mean, many times pieces that you don't have tell like a lot. But I mean, people just, I mean, ignore like the missing pieces. Because I mean, it's too difficult. Like I mean, many times it's too difficult like to take the missing pieces into account, or to build like, I mean, to build puzzle based on the on the pieces that you do not have. It's very, very difficult. So you build the puzzle according to what you have, and you make it like better, and you correct it with time. But still, I mean, many times you don't take into, I mean, there's a huge bias towards, I mean, what's in, like is there over what is not there. This, by the way, this is true regarding the history of the Jews. I mean, Jews, certainly in Israel today, they kind of like, they think of the history of Judaism, I mean, the way that, I mean, they mostly, I mean, they learn in school, like, I mean, they study in school, like, you know, regarding specific times in Judaism, like Second Temple, and, like, you know, and Zionism, and little bit about maybe, it's, like, you know, the Jewish Sfarad, like in the 15th century, in, you know, Europe, and I mean, and they tend to think that, I mean, like, the rest was just the same, like, I mean, but it's not true. I mean, there is so much, I mean, that it's just, I mean, that if the people did not like live like things after them, you it's impossible to build a picture, like, so you just assume that, I mean, what you have, I mean, is the model of reality, but this is just not true. And why do I mention all of this? And much of it might be like obvious to you, but I mean, I felt the need to mention it right now where we stand, because you need to understand something. If it's not obvious to you, you need to understand something. The relationship between Earth and Venus were not very like, they were not like you know, a tenet of human history or Venusian history. No. Mostly, I mean, they had their own history, the two societies, because the gates were not used mostly until the 20th century. But sometimes they have been used at specific times and by specific people, like specific cultures. And when they have been used, I mean, not just, I mean, just, as kind of like, an accidental discovery that, I mean, people just forgot after that. And you can ask, I mean, how can such a discovery be forgotten? But you need to understand something. I mean, what is known in the public is mostly always, I mean, only things that have political significance. This was true, I mean, certainly until the invention of writing. And even after that, I mean, mostly what you have, like most of the materials, I mean, up to the 20th or 19th century, up to the 19th century, I mean, most of written things that you have are either, I mean, documents that have kind of a political significance, or I would say documents that have political significance in the very minor scale, like famously courtroom protocols that survive, like, I mean, much more than any other like common documents, or taxpayers, or things like that. Things that, I mean, related to, I mean, how the political world or people are behaving, are managing themselves. That was what mostly, I mean, survived. And if a person just crosses a gate, and I mean, nothing, I mean, political happens, like no political events happen. I mean, maybe he has also great adventures, but I mean, so what? I mean, unless, like, I mean, he was the king, but why should the king do such a thing? So, I mean, in order for it to become like a political thing, it should, I mean, it requires, like, I mean, the actual like sovereign state or monarchy or whatever kind of like in politia that, I mean, that controls the area where the gate exists. It requires them to I mean, actively and procedurally initiate this exclusion and to grant, I mean, and as part of a political project. And this mostly was never done until Zionism, even though it has been done a few times, and always with horrible consequences. Always. It was always horrible. I mean, the best kind of situation, I mean, with regards to the gates, that people just, in the fairy tale, like Absalom, I mean, David, even before him, that's David, I mean, crossed it and, like, found that it's pretty similar to us and nothing interesting in there, and the people are barbarians, so, I mean, and they cannot speak, so they just, I mean, went home and told their family, and, I mean, it was kind of like a curiosity that people didn't know to believe or not, and that's it. But, I mean, in the rare occasions that actually, I mean, the existence of the other people caught, like, the attention of the rulers, or of the politia, of the political entities in Earth, it was always horrible. Now we should understand something. All the elements of the abuse, every element of the abuse could have been done like thousands of years ago. Like, there is nothing. Look at my own situation. I mean, mostly, I mean, like, I'm tortured in so many ways, but I mean, the weapon that is used mostly against me, like tremendously more than any other weapon, is just the human voice, or noise in general. Like, they torture me using noise all around the clock. Of course, they do many other things, like they execute me, they poison me, they infect me with all sorts of things, and I mean, and so much stuff, so much terror, so much state cruelty, but still, even like when we take into account all of that, 90% of the torture is sound. It's just noise, never-ending noise. And I mean, this could have been done like 5,000 years ago, and it has been done 5,000 years ago. It has been done 5,000 years ago. And of course, like, the drug could have been used like 1,000 years ago. There is nothing like, high-tech in the whole scene, the whole charade. And the clones could have been created thousands of years ago, like cloning people for all sorts of fucking abusive ways. Or, sexual, pervert conduct. I mean, all of this is nothing new about it. So, in essence, what you're going through right now, and you will go through, I mean, until this is over, supposedly there will be human will actually be alive after all this is over. But what you're going through is an episode that was already happened during, like, not only the times of Zionism, but also, I mean, during, historical times much before Zionism. And it didn't happen many times, but it happened several times, and it was always ended in catastrophe. And now, I mean, specifically, it happened around the 4th century, like in the Middle East around the 4th century. And another time that I know of is happened, I mean, towards the twilight of the Old Kingdom, which means maybe, I don't remember, like 4,000 years ago, something like that, or 3,500, I don't remember exactly, but something like that. These are two episodes that I know of. And you might ask, I mean, so why is it not recorded, and how did it like end? Like, I mean, because there should be like an end to the episode where people stop using the gate, and like, I mean, and they cover it with like I don't know what, and like, I mean, until it's really rediscovered much later. Because otherwise, I mean, if it was in continuous use, I mean, probably it will only like, you know, gather more and more in like attention. Obviously, it wasn't the case, because I mean, again, it was always kind of like, I mean, like a limit to how much it was known throughout history. So I mean, at both of these like episodes were ended in annihilation of the entire population in Earth, not you all over the Earth, but in the surrounding like of the gate. Like entire lands were just voided of people. So you can ask, I mean, so how do we not know about it? And here is the thing: when such thing happened throughout history, it happened actually from time to time. Mostly after thousands of years, you have no way to know about it. Like if a population I mean, like in an area that is like, I don't know, maybe like even the whole like area of the modern land of Israel, but certainly if it's much smaller, like if it's like, I mean, I don't know, like 1/5 or 1/4 of the modern state of Israel, which is quite a bit like in ancient, like in like, I mean, you know, in relation to what was like, I mean, the land that were mostly used, like the land, like the area of the land that were mostly used by you know, independent like sovereign state, like during ancient times, like 1/4 or 1/5 of the land of modern land of Israel is quite a bit. If, I mean, all the people in such a cell, a geographic cell, are just disappearing, this in ancient times this wouldn't like leave a tremendous like mark on anything. I mean, people wouldn't have, there was no one to write about it. So I mean, you cannot find it in history. Just, I mean, and you don't have any way to know about this void. I mean, you have some ways, but it's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult to, because I mean, the other, like, because I mean, it's not that you have like, I mean, constant documentation of everything that happened before and after. It's not like, I mean, a newspaper that, I mean, you have like every single day you have the newspaper, you have a copy, and like, I mean, there is like a year without like any kind of like a newspaper, and after a year, I mean, it's back to as normal, like, you know, every day a new newspaper. If it was like that, I mean, you could understand, okay, something happened, well, it's happened, but it's not like that. I mean, it's, I mean, it was everything that, I mean, regarding the ancient times, I mean, there wasn't like constant documentation, so it's very difficult just, I mean, you know, to see the void of the documentation and to deduce that something horrible happened, especially if you don't like even take it into account, like if you don't even like think about the possibility. So yes, it happened like in the 4th century, I mean, in the vicinity of this place, and also, I mean, it happened during the Old Kingdom, and it was just like, I mean, a Holocaust, like, I mean, they all died, like, I mean, tremendous amount of people, like, I mean, completely wiped out. And I mean, nobody wrote about it because there was no one to write about it. Every person that could have written about it died. So after some time, other people, I mean, you know, just, I mean, just slowly, I mean, you know, repopulated like the place and started their own history without even knowing what happened before them. And it's incredibly easy for it to actually happen during history. It's incredibly easy even now. Arguably, even if it happened right now, it could have been covered up by you know, the various intelligence agencies of the world, and nothing peculiar will actually happen. Like, I mean, people will not ask too many questions. And certainly during ancient times, it was very easy for such a thing to happen. And of course, such things happened, I mean, not in the kind of like a miraculous way, or like, I mean, you know, in a way that is related to science that is not known to humans, but it also happened just because of wars and diseases in the past. Like, you know, there is a famous colony, maybe it's Vinland or something like that, like, I mean, the colony in the Americas that were completely disappeared, and until now people don't know why. So, I mean, this was not a very big colony, but still, it happened during modern times, and it's kind of like a question, like, how did they all disappear? And until now, there is no answer to that. It happened after, I mean, not in the Middle Ages, it happened during modern times, and it was just a colony that disappeared from the Americas. Was it Vinland, or I'm not sure, like, I mean, or another name, I don't remember. But just the example of a colony that disappeared that no one knows why. How? Until now, just no one knows. It disappeared. And think that happened during the history. I mean, without the Venusian like context. I mean, just by, I mean, maybe, I mean, you know, the kind of like a war that everybody died, like, I mean, or just, I mean, few just ran away and, you know, and did not tell the stories, or maybe people didn't even know how to read and write. So, I mean, even if they had, like, people, I mean, in order for anything, like, to remain, this mostly, I mean, relied on the fact that other people, like, of higher education would have, like, found their story interesting and believed them, and mostly just, I mean, didn't happen. So this is one option. I mean, and another option, I mean, that, I mean, there was kind of like a war that everybody died. Or another option is just a disease that, I mean, that slowly just killed everybody. But I mean, what slowly? I mean, even if it took like a year or two, it's still, I mean, after 2 years, there are no more people, and I mean, mostly people that came after them didn't ask too many questions. Just, I mean, treated like, you know, as uninhabited land. So let's, I mean, no, let's take it for ourselves. So it happened quite a bit during history without the relation to Venus. But I can tell you that it happened with specifically, I mean, the issue, I mean, related to the abuse of the Venusian population. One time that I know for certain was in the 4th century, and one time during the twilight of the Old Kingdom in Egypt. And both ended in complete wipeout of, I mean, large cell of, like, a geographical cell of everyone. And after some time, some other people just, I mean, repopulated these places, and you know nothing about it. And it's very difficult to actually know because, I mean, nothing, I mean, there is no documentation of anything of it at all. You can only perhaps deduce it, I mean, if you intentionally search for it, and only by the gaps of documentation, and this will be incredibly difficult because in such ancient time there are more gaps than non-gaps, like in any case. So it's almost impossible to detect these kind of, like, presumably gaps in documentation. So, I mean, this already happened. I mean, complete wipeout of entire populations because of the Venusian abuse. It already happened. And to some extent, you can argue that it happened during the 1980s, even though, of course, not everybody was affected of it, just the ones that ate eaten the drug. But it was quite a bit of people. And it can happen tonight. I mean, it can happen this night. Take it into account especially when you, like, I mean, confront the option, like, I mean, of whether to move arms and legs to rescue me and my daughters from the Nazi prison, or perhaps you think that it's better, like, to send us another message, like, on the lines of, I mean, it's better to do it in not as you think that, I mean, in other ways. Let us do it our own way. I mean, what you suggest is naive and will not, like, you will not benefit from it. It's better to do it, like, you know, with lawyers and, you know, and social workers, and don't worry, we're sure that, I mean, they will be on your side. We will take care of that. We have our ways. This is Satan. This is demon. This is devil. This is the devil speaks from your mouth. And when you continue to walk this path, as you walked this path until now, think about, like, the Egyptians or the people of the 4th century in Israel, like historically the land of Israel. They wiped out completely, and it can happen to you at any moment.